what was important to you, beforehand? Family members, who were you before this?
Right.
Because if you're so focused on the other person, you're going to feel like you're the failure who didn't save my child or my family member. And you need to reconnect with the part of you that says, we're focused in the street. Because the more you help yourself, the better equipped you're going to be able to help the other person. We know from statistics that caregivers are the ones that suffer the greatest amount of health issues. We're talking about hypertension. We're talking about risk of heart attack, failed marriages. All of these things are happening. These are huge stressors. Why? Because the focus and the goal is, how do I rescue and save that person versus you need to get some rest. You need to take care of yourself. I can go on and on, but I know I've got some stuff that I want to get this practical.
I've got a great question right there with, it's interesting when you say, parents will sacrifice themselves. Nobody ever tells you as a parent, like, hey, that season is over, where you have to make sure the kids are okay. Because when does that season exist? But yet there are some benchmarks, where you got to put some boundaries in, right? Where you can do those things. But maybe it would be good if you kind of dug into what are some early warning signs that someone is neglecting their self-care? Like what could be some cues for family members? Because again, we want to minister to not only, the addict, we want to make sure that we're helping, okay? But it's the old put your mask on before assisting others, What are some warning signs for the husband who's just trying to, look, I need to probably pump the brakes because this is a warning sign because my wife is an alcoholic, or the wife whose husband is addicted to whatever substance, hey, things are going well, or the mom or dad that has a child that they're just trying to mom and love through, and there's just one more shot, I can't give up. What are some of those early warning signs that you're neglecting your own self-care, and how do they develop better self-awareness? That way they can say, hey, there's a light on the like my truck right now. There's an engine light that says oil change. I've been ignoring it for 2 weeks. Like what are some of those engine lights that we can see?
Well, and that's a great analogy about your vehicle. So that your vehicle's designed to alert you when you need to change the oil or you need to check the engine. These signs are put in place to tell you where these specific things need to be addressed. Your body is no different. So your body, your mind, your soul, all these things, you're going to get these warning signs that come up. So one of the first warning signs from a cognitive space or thinking is if you are noticing that you've got that brain fog going on, where you're forgetting things, you're tired. This is your brain's computer slowing down and saying, too much is happening right now.
Okay.
So we're trying to survive. So if you find yourself in a space where you're making mistakes that you don't usually make, and you're finding that difficulty in terms of thinking and focusing and concentrating. This is no different than when we're dealing with someone that comes into the office and says, hey, I think I might be depressed, and we look at stressors. The challenge with the caregiver is the caregiver doesn't go to the therapist, doesn't stop to get help, doesn't ask for it within a church or in a community setting, because again, everyone's so focused on this person that needs the help. No one stops to look at them and say, hold up, are you okay? You have a car accident, right? In comes EMS, emergency medical services, ambulance, and no one ever stops to ask the ambulance driver, are you okay?
Right.
It's assumed they're okay. But if you look at them and their life and at home, they may be going through these stressors. There's a great YouTube video of an ambulance driver at night sleeping, and there's a camera in the room, and he's talking to himself. And when was the last time that you were out here? And when's the last time that you had vitals? He's talking in his sleep. And he's interviewing someone that he had. So if your brain is so focused on that stressor and you're finding yourself making those mistakes, from a cognitive perspective, that's a warning sign. From a physical perspective, okay, if you find that I'm having these palpitations, or I'm having difficulty breathing. I mean, that could be a lot of things. It could be a panic attack. It could be blood pressure, headaches.
blood pressure.
Blood pressure. And those things are more properly diagnosed when you go to the medical doctor.
Right.
And you check in. And a lot of medical doctors, what they do nowadays, and this is very different from what happened before. Before, you walk in there and say, I've got blood pressure issues. Okay, they test you, here's medication, here you go. What you're starting to see with a lot of doctors now is they start asking you, and tell me, raise your hand if you've heard this question before. Have you lost any interest in activities in the last 14 days? Okay, so I see a hand raised. If you're hearing that question, what they're asking you is a screener tool. It's called the Patient Health Questionnaire 7. 7 simple questions to ask the individual to then determine, are they stressed? Are they depressed? Do we need to refer out to a mental health expert? And it's a great thing that medical doctors are doing this nowadays because what's the saying? You know, when you have a hammer, everything's a nail.
Right.
So, you know, if you're trained to look for medical issues, you're going to find them. But if you're also thinking, well, what's actually causing this? And if it's a mental health issue, if it's stressors, then great, let's refer out. Let's figure out how do we reduce the stress, because that may be the solution to the medical issue. So from a cognitive perspective, the thinking, the mistakes, the slowing down there, exhaustion, physically, heart rate, blood pressure, tension that you start to feel, pains or aches in different parts of the body that you didn't feel before. Signs that your body is telling you you need to slow down, you need to rest. And then emotionally, when it comes to looking for signs, you're talking about relationships where there's more tension, or you're finding that you're avoiding people. Because part of what happens when you're stressed taking care of another individual is, I'm sorry that this isn't resolved and it's 6 months going, or 6 years, and my story hasn't changed, and I'm ashamed that it's not working. So eventually people start to ghost or fade out.
Sure, isolate. Withdraw a little bit. That's great.
And the big thing for that, in terms of emotional care, is making sure that you are part of a diverse and large community. It's good to have 1 or 2 friends. It's great to have 10, 20 people that you can reach out to that know your story and know that they can pick up the phone at different times. A couple of weeks ago, we had a speaker, Dr. Claiborne, who talked about the idea of bringing casseroles to people. And the idea that when you have a casserole and you're bringing a dish, you are not the only person that's providing a meal for this family. You are one of many. And so emotionally speaking, relationally speaking, if you start noticing that you're tense and more irritable and these are challenges that are starting to happen, finding people that you can be honest and open and talk to. And that could be in a community like this. It could be with different people for different reasons. Because we know that when we get stressed over different things. And when you're a caregiver, you're stressed about finances. I might lose my job having to take care of this person. I'm wiped out of savings to have to take them to another treatment program. I have to take them there. I have to drive them there. So that's time. All those things are stressors. And when you're part of a bigger community and people know that, there's a community out there that's willing to sit in and say, I'll take care of your kiddo, or I will help out and support in this, or hey, I found some resources that might help out. So emotionally, you need to build those relationships because you can't be isolated alone.
That is such a powerful concept that I think in the world we live in today, isolating is actually emulated. It's like, let me be alone, let me withdraw. I need my own time. I got to be on the couch. I need me time, right? And what you're exposing, which don't get me wrong, you have to have time to recharge. That's the understood. But the broader your social network and your connectivity to the community, the more, if you run into these situations, the more resources you have available to you. That's fascinating. I also love what you said about how other relationships can start to falter. So maybe one of those signs is, am I experiencing stress with other relationships that I don't normally experience stress with? Like you might have great connections with certain friend groups, and all of a sudden you're seeing, wow, I'm starting to see stress in a bunch of other areas. Maybe the engine light's on, right? That is brilliant. Okay.
And when you have close people, they'll notice it for you. They'll probably see it before you do. They'll ask you, "Are you okay?"
Right.
And as you hear and you share your story, sometimes the emotional unburdening
Okay.
releases a lot of that and helps kind of balance things out.
Yeah.
But they're also going to be, and give them permission. Say, hey, listen, there may be days where I'm off and I could be wrong on certain things. But let me know, because again, if you look at the whole picture of the individual, because we talked about cognitive science, physical science, and then we're talking about emotional science. Well, that person will pick up on, hey, you seem a little off. Did you get rest? Did you get sleep? When's the last time you ate?
Right.
You know, and I've worked in recovery circles for a while now, about 20 years or so. And I started off Celebrate Recovery, which is a great group in churches. I also worked in drug rehab. And one of the things that we shared a lot with individuals is the acronym HALT.
Okay.
And I still use it, and it still works to this day.
HALT.
HALT, and it stands
Okay.
for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you
Hungry,
feel
angry.
off,
Okay.
and the reason why they share this in recovery circles is that if you are feeling a trigger to want to use, then you got to ask yourself, are you hungry? Because the wires may be crossed. It may be just you need to eat something, and that's why you're feeling this anxiety. And your brain understands anxiety as I need to fulfill it with my drug or my drink. So maybe it's just as simple as I need to eat. You're angry about something.
Yeah.
Someone offended you. That triggers emotions, and automatically you want to take care of that. Lonely or tired, those things are explanatory. But in those areas that we're talking about, cognition and physical signs and emotional signs, there's one more that I think is helpful to take inventory on: substance use. And it's counterintuitive, right? Because you're thinking, oh, well, they're so focused on this individual and their recovery, right? We never think to ask, well, how is your drinking?
What are your coping mechanisms?
What are your coping mechanisms?
Yeah, that's good.
And, you know, you may see an individual who's struggling with opioid addiction,
Yep.
but you may not think that, hey, my alcohol usage, you know, has increased lately. Or I've had a thirst for something I haven't had in a long time. And so these are the kind of things that as you explore for the caregivers, what are you doing to take care of yourself? And what is covering up the anxieties that you're dealing with? So taking that inventory on those 4 areas, physical, cognitive, emotional, and then just in terms of substance coping, we could say that's a start there.
That's good. So maybe you can explain, like, what is the difference, or what's the line between being compassionate, right, and being consumed? You know, like, because we should be, as, you know, family, friends, we should be really compassionate to those around us. But there's a line, and how can we know what that line is when it's crossed the line from, hey, I'm not being compassionate anymore, I'm actually being consumed by this?
Yeah, you know, there's in psychology they talk about relationships where there could be an enmeshment, and that means where you become, your identity kind of merges or fuses with the other person's identity. So now you're almost just awake as much as the other person who's dealing with the issue and the problem. And so where that line draws in terms of compassion and being consumed really has to do with, are you still taking care of your needs? Or has that been set aside because now this is the focus altogether? So I'll give you an example. If it is a child that's taking care of a parent,
Yeah.
and the reality is, you know, dad was drunk again, and I have to call off work because I got to take care of dad. You know, dad needs some support. Dad needs some help. And the consuming part of this dance in a family and the different roles that people play is that you begin to sacrifice your identity. This is why I was talking about values early on. If you know yourself, that self-awareness means that you need to know where I start and where this other person, or where I end and where this other person starts. But if you are going through that recovery process with them, not necessarily the recovery, but the addictive process, in that everything's starting to fall apart, that's when you have to branch out. That's why the community is so important. It doesn't have to be just you that is always there in that space.
Right.
I'm going to draw back to that example that I talked about those pilots. Here's the thing that I didn't mention. In that report, when they were talking about these were the best of the best, right? This is where they acknowledge the term burnout. And burnout to a pilot means that we're running on the last, dangerously low on fuel. So we're literally coasting on what little reserve we have. to make this function. That's what doctors, nurses, family members, they are used to running dangerously low on their reserves. And they do that because everything else, I don't have to eat right now, I'm focused on this. I need to set aside sleep because I have to solve this problem at 2 a.m. And when you live that way, guess what? You can survive for a pretty long time. Because just like anything, right? Exercise or anything that you do, right? The more you do it, the more you get better at it.
Yeah, you get used to it.
Including the more often you deal with chronic stress, the more your body develops almost an emotional callus and says, we have to push through to this.
Yep.
And it comes to an abrupt end when you have that heart attack or you have that emotional breakdown. So the idea behind this is to prevent from getting into that space. And the burnout, the compassion fatigue, again, where you draw that line is, are you still taking care of yourself? Are you doing things that are meaningful to you? So if I were to make a recommendation, I mean, the first recommendation would be identifying those 4 areas, and noting what's missing and what can I do to improve. The other recommendation I would make is finding something that builds you. Because again, if you've been so locked into helping this person for so long, you may have forgotten the things that make you smile and make you laugh. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It could be, hey, when's the last time you actually walked outside? When's the last time you've put a 24-hour, I'm not on my phone? Learn a hobby. Be terrible at it. I'm terrible at a lot of hobbies. It's great. Guess what? I learn. I'm not going to be an amazing artist and a painter. However, I'm getting my hands moving in ways that I'm not used to. Okay, I'm not great at different languages. I'm impressed by people who pick up a language and they've got the accent down and everything. Nope. I'm on Duolingo and trying to go through it and learn something and ding, ding. I've learned something new, a new word.
Yeah.
The idea is that you're challenging your brain to do something different.
Right.
You're challenging your body to be in a different space. Relationally, you may end up being in a crowd that you never knew. I heard this guy who said, when I was doing therapy, I recommended for them to do something, especially since they had social anxiety, do something that you're completely not used to doing. And they said, I volunteered at this comic convention thing, and I've never done anything like this before. And I'd never heard of it. And I was like, so what was the experience like? It was horrible. I made a mistake. This person said, I had this signed memorabilia, of a Captain America shield or something. And I had one job, which is just to put a sticker on it and log it on there so that it was verified that it was signed by this famous actor, right? And I messed it up. I was like, so what did you do? And he goes, well, I ran through that entire convention center looking for that person. And when I found them, I said, I am so sorry. I made a mistake. Can you come back so I can redo the sticker thing? And he said, this guy's like, oh yeah, it's totally cool. I'm on leave right now. He was on a kind of a military break, and he was coming in there, and he was excited about this. He says, it's okay. Mistakes happen all the time. Right. And then I look at this person who had social anxiety, and I said, so what was that experience like for you? I was like, I felt the panic that I usually feel, but I also felt relief that it wasn't the end of the world. Right. So that's another strategy, is you need to be okay with trying things that are different, that help you know what it's like to succeed and fail in a very low stress environment. Because families, that's a tough thing, but you need to find something that's new, and it feeds you, it fuels you.
No, that's good. That is so good. We had a gentleman here discussing neuroplasticity this morning with our staff, and he was kind of walking through, put yourself in situations where maybe you drive the same way to work every day because that's the best way to do it. Because you figured out that the light turns here and you can get there fastest from A to B. And he said one of the best things to trying to retrain your brain and bring better cognitive health was to just do a different direction. Just drive to work a different way. Go try something new. And I remember one time when Kelly, my wife, she was pretty ill, and she was in bed, and she was like, look, I got to rest it out, and it just wasn't getting any better. And I was like, you know what? We're going to try something different. and we live in Austin, Texas, where the sun is always out and it's always 90 degrees. I just pulled a chair out in the driveway and said, we're just going to sit here in the sunlight, and tried something different. And amazing, the next day she was like, oh my gosh, I actually feel better. Maybe you can speak to, for the caregivers that are working with people that have, substance misuse in whatever direction, what are some ways that we can set ourselves up with the right community, with the right people around us? Because I think so often the caregivers, the lights are blinging, and they're the people that put tape over the light on the dashboard. And they're like, if I just cover it up, I don't have to look at it. What are some ways that they can set themselves up to create accountability, so that way they have genuine vulnerability with others? Because you're only as accountable as you are honest. Yeah. And most caregivers I talk to, how are you? I'm great. No, you're not. You're lying. Yeah. Like, you're not telling the truth. Like, what are some systems we could set up that way to help them just change the whole environment?
Yeah, no, and it's true what you say, where people will say, I'm okay, right? Because we're trained to focus on other people's needs. We don't think about ourselves. And again, that goes back to, the air traffic controllers. These are the best of the best, right? They know how to fly planes. They know how to land them. Everything is great there. And no, I didn't make a mistake. You need to build into that community. There's lots of communities. I mean, we know of NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. They have groups that are there. We have some peer support groups that are running online. Okay. I think the goal and the intention of this group, of this community, of the CARES community, is for people to come here on Monday nights, to be able to hear information that may be the first time that they're hearing it. Right. But they're also in a crowd. And they're with other people that say, hey, I have a story, and I also need someone to connect with. And when you exchange information, you start sharing stories. Yeah. You start to grow your community.
Right, because we have a pretty large viewing audience, right, that watches us online. But maybe there's a phobia, or there's a fear of, like, what if I show up in person? Yeah. Everyone's going to think I've got problems. Yeah. Well, we've all got problems. Right? I mean, we're sitting here just saying, hey, by the way, we've all got problems, right? What would you say to the people that are online viewing that might have this whether it's a real fear or an unrealistic fear about showing up in person? What would you say to them to say, hey, this is the reason to be in the room?
Yes. First off, that's a real fear. You're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling that fear of being in a crowd with other people, and people will know and people will judge. And it's the hardest step, to be in a space with strangers, and anxiety will start to create narratives in our minds, right? We'll start to think people are thinking this, or they must think this about me. I'm going to tell you, like, just both professionally and personally, all the different spaces that I've been into, recovery spaces, 12-step programs. There are groups for so many addictions, struggles, challenges. There are many communities that are out there. And the one thing you hear the most is people walking in and saying, I didn't think I'd find someone who had my story. And yet that's exactly what they find. They hear their story being shared either on this stage, right, or with peers that they're talking to. That's the empathy. So sympathy, I feel sad for you, but empathy, I know what you're going through. And that's what this peer support model is all about, is that you are supported by individuals who are going through this walk in life, and you shouldn't go through alone. So for the person online who's contemplating, hey, do I come here in person? Just know that this is set up to be confidential. This is set up to be supportive. Right. And these communities are built to be safe so that we can actually be honest and say, when we're struggling, we're struggling. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be clean. But you have a good community in place. Right. They know how it is, and they'll pick up.
We've got a saying inside of our church, you don't have to be perfect, but you must be honest. Mm-hmm. And I think that, honestly, there's so much value in being in the room and working it out loud. In a lot of my pastoral counseling, the people know what they need to do. My job is just to connect the dots for them. And sometimes they're working it out and they just need a safe space to work it out, And so in your world, when it comes to the caregiver or even inside of the room here, what are some tips and or tricks that we can use to allow people to work it out in front of us? What are some ways that we can, practice some active listening or showing genuine compassion, but also knowing the threshold for, okay, now I'm being consumed by this. Like, what are some of those that you might offer us?
Yeah, I think that for any person that comes in and has challenges or difficulties or stressors, I mean, the key point is that active listening, right? It's the ability to be here, I'm here, I want to hear what's going on, I'm here to support, but also being prepared to say, we need to grow this network.
Say that one more time.
So I'm here to listen to you.
Yep.
And as the caregiver or the person who's listening to the caregiver that needs help, I'm here to support, I'm here to listen, but also recognize when we need to grow that network.
Okay.
And that means, hey, I've got a couple friends that I want you to connect with, and that being the supportive environment. In many communities, that's the small groups, that's the meetup groups that you find out, we all share something. It's the idea that the first level, it may be a one-to-one, but once you identify what the needs are, then how do we break this up so that it's not all on one person's shoulders? And here's the funny thing about that, is that when you do that and you share the support around, you're modeling for the individual that this is what you do for your loved one, that it's not all on you to have to solve your loved one's problems,
right.
That it's bigger and you can accept and embrace that support. And the thing is that when you're a caregiver and you're doing that for yourself, your loved one is also seeing that. And they start to feel like, oh, well, I think it's normal to be able to have a group of friends, of people that check up on you.
So what you're saying is one of the very best things you can do for the person you're trying to help is show them that you're willing to go get help yourself.
Yeah.
And participate in the program and get in and be open and be honest.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
Here's what happens when you do that. You're telling the individual that, hey, I know you feel like everyone's looking at you like you're the problem.
Right.
Okay. But I've got some stuff I need to work on for me.
Yeah.
And I want to show you that I'm doing that for me. And as I get better, I know it helps everyone else out. Okay. It shifts the pressure that the individual in recovery feels of thinking, oh, I messed up again. And everyone is perfect but me.
Right.
And when families start talking and they say, no, I may have issues with control, or I may have difficulties with trauma myself, and they start recognizing it, and they start to change, and they have their community, you're setting an example for your loved one that this is the path that they can take for themselves as well.
That's so interesting. So, today I was doing a little bit of research in a conversation with an individual that was around 10% of what we experience is actual direct experience, whereas 90% is more of what we call narrative, right? And how we design, how we believe that it happened. And the way people say it is, well, perception is reality, right? And the conversation we were in today was like, no, reality is reality. Your perception is different than reality, okay? From your experience, though, right, what is maybe a lesson you've learned personally that as you've gone through this, because you have extensive experience in, all the programs you mentioned earlier, in the addiction fields, right? What's something you've experienced and learned about caring for yourself? Do you have a personal story where you went through and you hit the road bump, like you hit the speed bump and went, whoa, I've got to brake check this myself?
Yeah. No, I'll tell you. I mean, It's a struggle, in terms of life. I've been a caregiver for my father, who's been sober from alcohol for 30 years, but then needed a transplant for his liver. And I mean, this is why he quit drinking, so he wouldn't be in this spot. And yet he needed that support. I'm a social worker. I know how to navigate through these spaces, right? So I'll do the paperwork. I'll stay up with you. We're 2 a.m. Where, I'm up every hour when they're doing blood work, and I will say, and this is not a knock on any professional or anything, but there was a night where we had a mistake and someone didn't check a certain level, and they said that's not standard procedure, and his ammonia levels were about 4 times the level of a normal person, and my father was just saying, it's like, what is it? He was talking to a nurse and said, "You have an interesting accent. What part of the country are you from?" And then 10 minutes later, a person comes in and says, "That's an interesting accent. What part of the country are you from?" And it was such a subtle thing, but it was like, there's some cognitive issue happening here.
Right.
And we remember that ammonia levels were something to track. It took about 5 hours for us to finally have someone that heard us and said, "We need to check that level." And we discovered that post-transplant, it was the plasma transfusions that they were providing to him that were supposed to help him. We're helping, but plasma stays there. And I'm not a medical professional, but the plasma sits there and accumulates ammonia, which wouldn't be a problem for someone with normal functioning organs.
Right.
But for someone who can't process it,
Right.
this would kill them. And so that's the stress of living that 24/7 while being a parent and a husband, and the struggles and pressures that are happening in there. I've had this happen in my life before too, where I had a great cousin of mine who, my uncle called me and said, "Hey, I need you to come to the hospital because, yes, he's struggled with addiction. Someone slit his throat today, and he's in ICU right now in an induced coma." And I remember holding his hand, and talking to him. And later he would come out and say, "I remember all the words that you said and where you were talking to me, and I wanted to scream and I couldn't." So for me personally, I felt this, I've got this knowledge and information, I can help. But the challenge for me was all the things that I talked about before. Well, how much rest was I getting? How much support was I reaching out? I was so focused on all this, driving back and forth, that it became a tough challenge to think, okay, I'm holding these family members in one hand, but I'm having to hold here too. And so at a certain point, you have to let go, because if you burn yourself out, you won't be able to help anyone. And it's just sadness for your family to see you wither away.
Right.
So for me, that was a lesson during that time, that I needed to reach out, and I did. I had some great friends who I reached out to and said, "Hey, look, life is tough." Pastor Dan, I think it's okay for me to say, but I reached out to you when I was in that hospital, as well, and called you up and said, "Hey, life is going in some crazy directions. I could use some support."
Right.
And you were very great. And I know that's a story that many people in your congregation have repeated as well. And that was on the onset of this program here.
Right.
So that community piece, I've got friends that know if they haven't heard from me in like 7 days, they will find me.
Yeah.
It's like, "Are you okay? What's going on? Okay, you missed some texts. Okay, that's fine, but how are you checking?" I've got a couple guys who, it's our trio, and we get together for lunch or breakfast every so often. And I love what my friend does. He takes a picture of us, all 3 of us. And he's been doing this every time we get together since we all met up maybe about 2 years ago. And when times got tough, he'd send those pictures and say, "Hey, you're not alone.
Right.
You have support."
That's such a good thing. Maybe one thing we all need to hear tonight is just check in on your people, right? Go, how important is it for us to just check in and ask people, like, "Are you okay?" And then when they say, "Yep, I'm good," go, "Not really." Like, are you really doing okay? And then the challenge is to be honest.
Yeah.
Right? The challenge is, well, I don't want these people to think that I'm a failure. Maybe you could help us kind of break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, a great leader in my life once said, "You're only as accountable as you are honest." How do we muster the courage? How do we learn to become more honest and answer the question based on the idea that I think most people are not honest because they don't want to be a burden? And so when it comes to the caregiver, well, I don't want to become a burden to somebody else because I realize how much of a burden this is on me. So I'm not going to do that to somebody else. Maybe you could unpack that because you've got so much experience.
Yeah. Oh no, I love this, and believe me, like I'll go on for days on this one. So as a therapist, there's a specific type of therapeutic intervention style. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And with CBT,
Sure, CBT.
So for short,
sure, CBT.
So and it breaks down very simply. It's just cognitive means your thoughts
Yep.
influence your behaviors,
Okay.
and they're connected. So if you can identify the thought that kicked off the feeling, then you can change your behaviors. And so there's a strategy in cognitive behavioral therapy where they ask you to work through the ABCs. The A is the what happened before, the antecedent. The B is your behavior, and then the C is the consequence. And most of the time, all we see is the consequence. They blew up on something. Okay, so that's the consequence. Everyone walked away. The behavior was you blew up. The consequence is people are upset and they're moving away. But the antecedent was you felt hurt. Something was said to you.
Okay.
So the challenge is if we can reshape or reinterpret the thought that you have, that might change the path altogether. Well, this has been said before on the stage and many other places, but the fight, flight, freeze, fawning, the part of us that says, if you see a tiger down the street, okay, you don't stop to ask, why is there a tiger, right there on 629?
Right.
You just start running or you try to hide, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's say the next day you look on the news and then there's, a clip there on the news that says, hey, there was a circus truck flipped over and all the wild animals, including a tiger, were roaming free. Okay, now you have an answer to something that didn't make sense.
Right.
But in the moment, your body doesn't think about why is this happening, it just reacts. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, what you're doing is you're retraining your mind into saying, hey, this is not the end of the world right now. Tomorrow will be another day.
Right.
So when you feel as a caregiver that I need to act right now, I need to do this because no one else will, you need to slow down and say, hold on, what are you sacrificing right now? Who do you need to reach out so that you share this? So it's not just on you. And if you can challenge that thought that says, if I don't do it, then everything will fail, they will be in danger, they may die, and it will be my fault. If you can challenge that thought, and the more reasonable thought is, I can support, I can help, but I don't have to sacrifice myself right now for this. Let me reach out to wise counsel around. What can I do? Then the behavior may be steady. Don't act on this right now. This is impulse, this is emotion. And the consequence may be that the individual rides it out. Maybe the individual finds a support. Maybe the individual follows up on what was offered there. But you're not burning yourself out by losing another night's rest. Right. And you're refueling yourself rather than emptying what little you have on your tank.
That's good. Are there resources available? Because I think that you just tapped into something, especially for the caregiver. Mm-hmm. Well, there's nobody else right now. Well, I don't know that that's true. Is there nobody else, or are there other resources? Are there, 24-hour hotlines that people can call? Are there other places where people can get resources? What if they don't have the funds? What other systems and what other resources might be available that the caregiver is unfortunately just ignorant, not because they're foolish, but instead they're just uneducated. They just don't know. No, there are these levels of resources available that you could reach out to. And maybe one of the most loving things you can do is hand the ball off right now to someone who might be better trained.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell people that, I can give you a list of numbers and different organizations you can reach out to. The number I always use is 988. It's simple. It's easy to remember, 988. And the reason why I say that is just like 911 would be emergency, 988 is a suicide prevention line. But on that line, they will also have resources. They connect to the local organization nearby, mental health authority that's tasked with, hey, do we need to do an assessment? Do we need to provide resources? Where do we connect? That's an incredible resource. And 988 wasn't always the case. It used to be different numbers, but there was legislation that passed a couple years ago where they said, no, we have to have just one direct number on that. So that's my number one big recommendation. If you find yourself at 2 a.m. or any other place and you're like, I don't know where to go to, try there. They'll triage it and they'll find the right resources. That's local to you. Beyond that, communities like this, what's happening here, what we want to form and how we want to grow this program, this is something you want to pay attention to and you want to come here live. Online presence, we're going to receive that. So if you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, LinkedIn, and you have questions, or on our new YouTube channel, where we have our videos now being posted and streaming. So if you're on there and you make a comment, we want to follow up and we want to provide resources. But we also want to welcome you into this space physically so that you can start connecting with people and start sharing your own story and start picking up on how to work those things.
That's good. So along that lines, would you say 988, and that connects you to the suicide prevention or either other resources from there? What would you say to the person that has the fear saying, oh no, what if I send them to this number and now I opened up a can of worms and maybe I made the situation worse? Because I think that in the caregiver's mind, they don't want to compound the problem, but they also feel the stress of not knowing the answer to the problem. What would you say to them trying to hold those two truths in tension?
Okay.
You know, how would you encourage them to work through that process of, I don't have the answer, but I don't want to make it worse. So then they get kind of the analysis paralysis. What would you say there?
Oh, that's funny. So there's a whole other therapy. I won't get into it, but it's called dialectical behavioral therapy. And one of the big things that they talk about
yes, dialectical. Yes, yes. So, I am very familiar with that.
It's really interesting. It's pretty cool because it's and DBT for short.
Right.
So, but
that's the way I was going to say it, but I wanted you to tell them.
Well, the neat thing is that they talk a lot about having two opposing thoughts, you know, and sometimes when we panic in that flight or fight mode, right, we feel like we have to choose one option. I have to make a decision in this moment. And the reality is, no, these two truths can be the same and at the same time. So when you're talking to the caregiver and there's that fear of, hey, if I call these people, this might blow things up. Yeah, it might.
Right.
And you might save them too.
Right.
You know, and get them the help. And I'll tell you, as a clinician, as a professional who's had to make that call and saying, yeah, we need to reach out to emergency services. We need to connect here. It's a tough call to make, but I also think that when you're sincere and you want to care, one of the best things you can do is say, it can't all be on me.
Right.
And when you have that conversation early on, and we therapists, we do this a lot, you know, we talk about confidentiality, we talk about exceptions to confidentiality, and the way I frame it is, hey, anything you share in this space stays here. The only time is if there's a child being hurt, or I feel like there may be a danger that you might harm yourself. Those are the times that I would break that. Now, I'm happy to be wrong about that. And all that would happen is be embarrassed because someone showed up and knocked on your door and be like, hey, are you okay? I want to check up on you.
Right.
But on the off chance that it could be wrong and something is happening, we want to make sure that you're okay. So yeah, to the caregiver, letting them know that this is part of the plan that you make. Speaking of plans, I want to throw one last thing in here. There's one more exercise, which is when I had to write it down so I wouldn't forget the name. It was the help from the future. Help from the future. And this is borrowed from a model called Invitation to Change. Love that. A lot of what we're doing here is infused with that model. It's Invitation to Change is a way of providing information, knowledge, but that is solution focused. That's non-shaming. And so when you're reaching out to the future, it goes a little bit like this. You ask the caregiver, let's say, Pastor Dan, you're helping someone right now, and you're like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'm in the right place. I don't know how this is working out. I have so many mixed feelings about this person that I care about and I want to help out. So then I would say, Pastor Dan, I want you to pretend that you are 80 years old. Okay, so that's 60 years from now.
Right.
You're 80 and you're at your retirement party and they're showing pictures of everything you've done. And that person, that family member in your life, says, hey, I want to make a toast. And begins to describe to you who you were during that time where they were probably the most difficult towards you.
Okay.
What would you want them to say about you? What would you want them to describe and say, this is who you were in that moment, and thank you for being that person because I needed that?
Yeah.
What would you say, Pastor Dan?
Well, how would I answer that? Oh my gosh. How would I want them to describe me in that moment?
Yeah, because they're okay now.
Yeah.
You know, they're great. They're doing fine. And what you did in that moment
Yeah.
had an impact on them. So how do you envision them describing you?
Man, I would want them to know that I was there for them, that I wanted what was best for them, that I didn't need anything in return, but I was going to tell the truth and be open and honest and get them the best help that they needed, regardless of whether it hurt me or not. Yeah. I think those would be the things.
So that's what they would be saying to you. They'd
Yeah.
be saying, hey, I thank you for being honest
Yep.
with me, for being there,
Yep.
for not letting go,
Yep.
and being that person there in that
Yeah.
space and being open and honest. So for the caregiver that struggles, because right now in the moment, all they see is pain, to create a vision of a future where this person is now healed and this person looks back and says, this is what I needed from you in that moment, that gives you a goal. And when you take care of yourself and you're saying, well, you know what, I'll take that call, but I'll also educate myself on what resources are available. I'll also work to do exactly what you're doing now, which is you've opened up your space here for this community to build and thrive here. You have done that
Right.
for people. That's what you hope to hear. Then how do we work towards that? Because we can't fix the other person. We can only worry what's on our side of the street. It's an analogy, a metaphor that's been used often, right? We can only do what we can on our side of the street.
Right.
So what do you do so that you can be available, that you can take care? And I'll add another point to that. When you do that, remember, you are serving as an example to your loved one.
Right.
If you're a parent that's struggling with a child in addiction, when you take care of yourself and they see you smile, that brings joy to them.
Yeah.
When it's genuine and you are taking care of yourself, they want a part of that.
Right.
When you're a spouse or a former spouse and you're working through the addiction and the issues with this parent that you're co-parenting with, if you take care of yourself and you're getting good rest, down the line, when we get past this, they're going to remember that you were at peace and you did what you could to remain at peace and bring that peace into this relationship.
I think that is so good. You know, I think all of us want to finish well. I don't think anybody would look at them, hey, I don't want to finish well. You know, I want to burn out and just go down in flames at the end. You know, what are some things that you'd say, listen, you know, in order to finish well, if I could give you one thing tonight, you know, here's the one thing that I would give you.
Ooh.
You know, in kind of being a caregiver, in dealing with this space and how difficult this space is to deal with. Here's the one thing I would say: use this practice, use this rhythm, use this habit, whatever those systems or tools are. You know, what would be the one thing that you'd want people to kind of walk away with tonight?
Okay. I'm going to answer that with a story, and I promise it'll be the last one for tonight.
Okay.
But you remember when I was talking about Leave It to Beaver and Barbara Billingsley? Okay. I actually met her. I met her in Southern California at a Costco. You know, I was probably about, someone else did too?
I met her at a dinner theater in Kansas State.
Oh my goodness. Okay, someone met her at a dinner theater in Kansas City. This was meant to be.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so it's like Barbara Billingsley needed to be talked about tonight.
Yeah.
So I see her at Costco, and I light up because I know this lady. This is a celebrity. It's like I see her on TV all the time, and I walk up to her, and my sister. We were both like kids, probably like 10 and 8 at the time, and I go, "Excuse me, are you the mom from Leave It to Beaver?" And Barbara Billingsley, June Cleaver, in her very compassionate, kind voice says, "Why, yes, I am." And I was like, it was like I'm just starstruck.
Yeah.
And say, "Okay," and we walked away. And then I looked at my sister. I was like, "We need to get an autograph. We need to find something." So we found a scrap piece of paper and a pen, and we walked up to her again and said, "I'm sorry, but can I interrupt you? Could we get your autograph?" And she says, "Of course." And she signs it, and then she starts explaining that she was there with her son and that they were shopping together. And I see this grown man next to her, and I'm like, "Oh, wow," And then she says something that I didn't expect. Now, okay, we already had people raise their hands when I said, "Hey, anyone seen Leave It to Beaver and then Return to Leave It to Beaver?" Okay, raise your hands if you remember the Muppet Babies from the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Terrible.
Okay.
So bad. It was so bad.
Don't lie, you enjoyed it. So as as she's signing this, she goes, "Well, do you know that character Nanny on Muppet Babies?" Now, for those of you who haven't watched this show, Muppet Babies is exactly what it sounds like. It's the Muppets, they're babies, they're always cared for by this woman, Nanny. About Nanny, you never see her face. Never. And the closest you get to it is she's riding a moped and she has a helmet on. Or she's on the moon, walking around with a space helmet. So you never see her face. She's always right off camera, off the shot. And she says, "Well, I do the voice of Nanny." And I was like, what a revelation. I'm like, not only do I get the signature, but I finally get to see Nanny's face for the first time. This is a big deal for me as a kid. So why am I sharing that as a closing story? When you ask, what's one thing that you should do?
Right.
Walk with your head high. Don't be ashamed. Be seen. Let people see your face. The days that you're happy, the days that you're sad, the days that you're frustrated. Because here's the thing about being downcast, right? It's we bury our faces in shame. We look away. We try to hide because everyone loves to hear someone who's happy. But we have been trained to think when people are in sorrow, we don't know what to do with that. Go somewhere else with that. That is not what this community is meant to be. This is a space where we talk about hard stuff and we relate with each other and we talk about mistakes that we have made, challenges that we're going through, and how we support each other. That's critical. So the example of Nanny, I got to see her face. So make sure that as a caregiver, you have communities where you can show your authentic face and you can get the help and support that you not only need, but deserve.
It's so good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and giving us your time. I don't know if you want to move to questions that are out in the crowd or how you'd like to.
Happy to. If there's any questions here, I'm more than happy.
First of all, I really appreciate the second half of this, and I'll tell you why. The first half was eerily reminding me of how a lot of people get to substance abuse, right? They're overstressed. They're juggling a bunch of things. Caregiver, you talked about pilots. Imagine a pilot who was in the military, lived a very strict life, gets pushed to a point where he breaks. And then we find him with 5 cocktails before a flight, and he gets everything thrown away. So I just wanted to make a statement there that I really appreciated the second half in that, because a lot of what you described in the first half I thought was how people fall down, and because these caregivers and the stress and such can bring you right down the rabbit hole. you've tried to do too much. So I just wanted to make that statement. Dan, I
Right.
really appreciated the last questions and certainly the answers because it brought it full circle.
No, perfect. No, I
Thank you.
get it. I get it.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I'll say that when it comes to being in the spaces, because there's still a lot of stigma around talking about substance abuse, and kind of like what we were saying at the very beginning. You know, it's like it hasn't gotten any better, and it's been
Right.
6 weeks or 6 years. You know, and so there's that feeling sometimes that people have of like, I can't talk about this. So you're part of a community. You're going to find that even when things get good,
Yeah.
there's still problems. You know, Thanksgiving and Christmas are coming around, and we all know that we're going to walk away with some really interesting stories with family members that we're still working through things. You know, so those are the things that, we're always going to be working on stuff. Yeah. Now,
Dan, you mentioned you asked people how they're doing.
Sure.
And I know I'm 59 years old, my standard answer is I'm okay. What do you recommend, or how do you recommend, for me, if I'm asking somebody that, and maybe they're in that struggling situation, how to get beyond that?
Oh, you're asking me. Okay.
Yeah, I'm asking you because
I'm sorry. I didn't know I was going to be interviewed here tonight, so that's not part of the contract.
Well, maybe you can answer, but you had mentioned
Yeah,
that
no,
this is a typical guy
No,
answer.
I'll
and I don't
absolutely
mean-
answer
it's-
that.
I'm fine. Everything's fine.
Well, I think that it really, and it's really what Rene has been talking about tonight, is that self-awareness, knowing where you are. And I think for me, what I do with other people, and I challenge other people to do, is genuinely listen. I think most times when people are having conversations, they're waiting for their turn to talk. They're not genuinely listening to what the person is saying. What is their face saying? What is their nonverbals? What is their posture saying? And I think, once we learn to kind of see the entirety of the person, we can ask further questions and go, hey, how are you? I'm fine. And I'm like, I would challenge that, but I'm a little bit of an aggressive person. I've been accused of this in the past by a few people sitting next to you, but I would even ask the question and say, it's okay to not be fine, and even leave room. One thing that I think our culture is not very good at is dealing with silence. Like, we don't deal with the awkward pause. Everything comes at us in clips and reels and in such fast pace that I think that we've lost the ability to allow there to be the awkward pause and just ask them the question, like, it's okay to not be okay. And then let space be there. And oftentimes I find in my line of work, when you allow that space to be drawn out for a moment, they'll nervously start talking and saying, just make the silence stop. So they start actually telling you how they're really doing in that moment. Does that make sense? Or does that not answer the question?
Well, no, it does. And the reason I ask it is, you get to a certain age, and I've seen good friends, that said, I'm just fine.
Yeah.
And now they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
For various reasons.
Right.
And I don't know if it's something that it's a trait that we kind of grow up with, that I'm fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's different seasons of life, and you get to a certain point, and you've already seen some of the tragic results because you let it go as, it's fine.
Yeah.
That's why I asked it.
Yeah.
So, and I'll add to that because I think you're right. I mean, there's this pause that happens, and you give enough breathing room for an answer. And
Right.
and what you're saying is you're giving them space. You're saying that, hey, I'm not going to just ask you, how are you doing? You say, fine. great, have a good day, and that's it. Our conversation's over in less than 15 seconds. You're standing there because I will make the time to hear what's really happening. And I have seen this happen before where, people will say, hey, how are you doing? And the answer is like, oh, I'm fine. No, but how are you really doing? And I don't want you to think that we're pressured and that conversation then goes, we're going to a coffee shop. I'll buy you coffee. Or, hey, whatever's happening right now, I'm going to pull away from that. What's going on? How can I help you? And so I think, what Pastor Dan said is perfect. Is like when you get to know the individual,
Right.
you get to see them. And that's the value of building a relationship that's genuine and authentic, because you'll know when the I'm fine doesn't really mean I'm fine. And that you need to spend a little more time to ask deeper questions. So, therapist information, right?
Yeah.
Suicide prevention. The biggest thing that people worry about is asking someone, are you thinking about killing yourself or suicide? That's the one thing that we train students from the beginning is you need to be comfortable asking that question, because the person who's ready to do something like that will probably answer you very honestly. Yeah, I have a plan and this is what I'm going to do. But no one thinks to ask them that serious question. So when people are suffering and they're at their lowest and they feel like they have no resources, and someone says, no, I'm going to ask you how you're doing, but I want to hold on to it. How's your family doing? How are things going? And open that communication, be authentic. That's challenging. And it goes against our intuition of like, hey, I'm short on time.
Yeah.
Or this isn't the space for that kind of emotion. You
Right.
throw that out the window.
Right.
People will actually start to feel comfortable sharing about that. So I do conferences where we talk about burnout prevention, and what I learned very quickly at the beginning is that what I thought was a presentation of self-care, how do you take care of yourself, quickly turned into how does the organization create a culture where people are allowed to be cared for. So whether that's church or work, we need to start talking about expectations. Yeah. We need to start talking about the workload. We need to start talking about resources. What does someone need in support for their help? If you can change that whole language and the environment becomes safe enough where the person knows I don't have to answer with an I'm fine because I'm going to burden you. Because the community has already said, no, we want to hear that tough part and we want to help you. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. I will share that I know some things, I don't know all things. So, I jokingly say, it's just my opinion, that's my 2 cents, and if you don't like it, you can keep the change. So, it was a funny joke maybe the first time I said it.
That's good.
No, but it's just an opinion, it's just thoughts, and there are many thoughts around that. But yeah, I'm happy to share at least what I can.
I think another component to it is we have to learn to care for each other again as humans. There's been so much that we're desensitized to that we have to learn to care for each other. And it's, I do a lot of counseling with young adults, and they're like, look, I want to meet this kind of person. I want to meet this kind of person. They're all about making sure they find this perfect mate. Well, number one, that doesn't exist, But the biggest thing that I say to them is, listen, why don't you be the kind of person that kind of person would be attracted to? So if you want to find this amazing, counterpart, you have to be that kind of person. And so what I'm saying is we have to learn to care for each other again, and be caring and listening, and create the kind of space where people can answer us honestly. And I can tell you that in my line of work, my son was with me today, and he goes, Dad, this is exhausting. And I was like, what? He goes, watching people walk up to you. And I was like, okay, well, look away, And he goes, does it ever just wear you out? And I was like, sure. Like, we're all human. We get to a point where it's like, all right, I'm done. I don't have any more. But I think we have to be that kind of people that other people know that they can come to. Mm-hmm. you know? And as we do that, then I think people are going to be more honest. They're going to be more vulnerable. They're going to know that it's a safe space to say, hey, I don't think I'm okay right now, you know? And I think if we become people who care again, then we start creating a community, and we can just do that one relationship at a time. And clearly I'm a pastor, so I think Jesus modeled this pretty well with 12 dudes, and it kind of impacted the world.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm going to say that's powerful right there, is that you may identify the leader and say, I know that person's a safe person, right? And that's why people come to spaces like this, or they go to a therapist and say, I know that person's a therapist. But when you create a community where everyone is
Right.
like that,
Right.
compassionate pastor
Right.
or supportive therapist, and everyone in that room is that way,
Yep.
then that's what we were talking about from the beginning, is where you grow the network and the support, and it never falls on one person's shoulders.
Right.
Because, the whole concept of, the therapist or the person, the knowledge, the expert, I mean, we have a lot of knowledge that's shared every Monday on this stage here. And what we want to get to is building connections, relationships, and safety amongst people there. So if you can build that in, it doesn't have to be always Pastor
Right.
Dan on speed dial,
Right.
right?
In fact, it really shouldn't be.
Right. So
It really shouldn't be.
but that's the whole thing about modeling this, is
Yep.
creating more of this, because that's where it's more sustainable.
Yeah.
And people know that they can turn to people at different times. That's a shift in the community. And I think that's what I was getting at, is that the shift in the community, this shift in the philosophy where you can feel safe and open to talk about these real, raw problems in a community that will welcome you, a community that will say, you don't have to have this all perfect.
Right.
And it won't be resolved overnight. And this will be a journey that could go on for years, if not decades. And you will have this tribe, this group, this community that will be with you at every moment as you go along.
And that's what really drew me in when a couple dudes in my church started to talk about creating this community. And I was like, the church needs more help. There's no pastor you're going to talk to where he goes, oh, I'm over-resourced, I'm over-equipped, and I just have tons of free time. You're not pastoring if that's what's happening in your world. And so the concept, of the University of Texas and the social work, community coming together and locking in with the church where the needs are, they're right in our face every day. They're on our front doorstep. I love that those two come together and lock arms and say, how do we create change together, and the partnership there. So thank you for what you're doing, Rene.
Well, and I'm going to throw it right back at you, because this would not happen if it not be for a community that says, we want to open our doors, we want to welcome. And I've seen that from day one, how welcoming you are of anyone walking in here. And if they need support, you are there to help them. I've seen you, I was there the day you shared about running into a congregation that was meeting in a donut shop. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it was a Spanish-speaking community
Yeah.
that had been praying for a space.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget what you
Yeah.
said, which is, well, we have space,
Right.
and we don't use it on Sunday afternoons.
Right.
Let's make something happen.
Sure.
And how thrilled they were. And if I remember correctly, was it the mother of the pastor?
Yes.
The mother of the pastor that reached out and thanked you.
She stood right here in the front, and probably one of the most humiliating, humbling, raw, purest moments is when she just held on to me for, it had to be it felt like 7 years. It was probably literally 2.5 minutes of just sobbing and embracing the entire time. And I'm like, okay, we're good. Yeah. Okay, we're good. And she wasn't done. That's true.
At the university level, we've got research, and all research means is that we're testing things out. We're trying to figure out what works that we can hand off somewhere else, that it can be repeated with the same positive results.
Yeah.
But what we need are communities that say, we want to do this work, and we have a hunger and appetite to be able to reach out to the community. And that's what Cornerstone here represents, is that launching point for us to be able to merge these two spaces where we can say, let's figure out something that can work. in a community that's willing to embrace that. Because let's be real, not all communities are open to working on these hard things.
Yeah.
And the pain that doesn't go, it doesn't disappear overnight. This is a commitment. It's a long journey here to commit to.
Yeah.
But your church has opened the doors for that. And so very grateful for what's growing here, what's around the corner. I mean, we launched these series back in March, and we're here going on into October, the second season of speakers. What we have coming around the corner are more speakers that are going to be talking about understanding yourself. And then we go into communication skills. And this is on purpose. But 3 weeks in November, 3 speakers in November, 3 speakers in December. And they're going to speak specifically to how to communicate with your family members. And that's intentional because we've got the holidays coming on. So show up because you're going to take things that are going to help you when you're around the dinner table, or you're opening gifts, or you're wondering how can I repair relationships so that we can enjoy these things again. So that's what this program represents. Very grateful to you, Pastor Dan. Is it okay for me to transition to closing?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good.
This weird space of where I'm being interviewed, and it's like, yet I'm still kind of like trying to drive these little things. So, Pastor Dan, thank you for opening your doors again.
Of course.
And this community, and keeping this open for the community that's looking for this. We're here every Monday night. We'll have different speakers speaking on these topics. Please, if you're online and you're watching, whether now or later, feel free to like us on YouTube, subscribe so that you're up to date when the new live streams come through. On Facebook, Instagram, and also LinkedIn, spread the word, share. We want as many people as possible to benefit from the conversations that are happening here so that we can build communities together. The 3 words that resonate with our program is to educate, to support, and provide resources. So we hope that you've gotten that tonight. Look forward to our next speakers. I'm going to challenge you, look online. We've got our speakers lined up for the next 2 weeks. And this is your first time here in person or online. Simple message to you. Welcome home. We'll see you next Monday. Thank you so much for joining us.